Hello everyone! Today I'm going to be remaking the knight. I'm going to be using this Howling Wolf doll. She's quite a bit taller than the original, but she also has more articulation, so we're going to be using her. As always, we're going to start off by cutting off all of her hair, then taking the plugs out and cutting off her ears. To cover up the holes in her head, I'll be gluing on tiny squares of cloth and then covering that with more glue and letting that dry thoroughly. Instead of using acetone to take off her face, I'm just going to paint over it since I'm going to paint the whole body anyway. So I start off by painting a few layers of white on there and then going for a lighter skin tone because I plan to make the knight very pale like I did with Hornet. And apparently this only occurred to me after I painted the whole head, but to go with the more gender-neutral look I want, I should probably cut off the full lips. So I do that and then sculpt on a new pair of much smaller lips. After I paint over the clay, I go on and paint the body, and then again realize I should sand down the chest, but turns out I don't have a Dremel tool, so I just go with the roughest grain of sandpaper I have. And also, I should probably mention that I have a mask on for this, otherwise I would be breathing in a lot of plastic dust. And then afterward, I put on a small bit of clay to fill in the holes that I left, and paint over the body once again. This took forever. Once I put enough coats of paint onto both the body and head, I jammed the head back on before getting started. Before I get started on the face, I'm gonna make the mask. I first lay down a sheet of clay over the face as a base. That rhymed a lot. Then I go in with more clay once that's dry to smooth it over and make it look like it's not just a big imprint of a face. After smoothing it all out, I put the horns on, or at least attempt to. The mask came off in my attempts to do so, which actually made it easier for me. But this part was a bit of a challenge. And then I forgot to film like every other part, but I painted the mask, and now I'm adding an embroidery string, and then tying it around the head. At first I tried blushing the doll with black, because I don't have gray, to give a more dead look, but it didn't work, so I switched back to red, and am now working on the face. So I fill in the whites of the eyes, and then paint the eyes gray with a bit of black in them. After outlining the eyes with black, I outline where I want the eyes to go and then paint them in white. I don't know why I decided to glue on the hair from this angle. It made it like 10 times harder, but I'm gonna be honest, I was feeling a bit lazy and didn't want to move my tripod to set up a new angle, and that came back to bite me in the butt. So I'm very bad at cutting short hair. I think this is one of my better attempts, but it's still not the best. Anyway, for the clothes, I take the same patterns I did with Hornet, but make them a bit smaller, well actually quite a bit smaller, for the little sister body type. I start with the tights, and I use white chalk to outline it on some black fabric. Then I roll them into tubes, and then sew them up together. And then I put those two tubes together. You can't really see it because everything is black, but I put them together and then stitch them up together. I also outline the tunic pattern on the same fabric, and then fold that in half and sew it together. And finally, the cloak. I also draw that in a white chalk line because I don't think black pen would show up as well on gray fabric, and I don't have a Sharpie, but I cut it out and add snaps. For the last accessory, I take some faux leather and cut out enough to make a belt. I paint this belt gray with some watered down acrylic paint. Then finally, I add a similar closure as I did to Hornet's belt, and we can start working on the very last thing, the sword. I started out with a pattern on some parchment paper, and then I laid down thick slabs of clay and just cut it out. I tried to sculpt it. It didn't turn out well at all. This was the best solution I could think of, honestly, because I am terrible at sculpting. After I let that dry thoroughly, I paint the whole thing with the base layer of gray. I had cut some cracks in it earlier with an X-Acto knife, and I go over those in a black to make them more pronounced. And they're done. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. See ya!